everybody to our final installment for now of Whole Being Health with Dr. Sarah Sue Myers. We are so grateful for all of the awesome education she's been able to bring us through the last couple of years with virtual plant walks in person on the farm. Can't wait for that one day when we're all safe. And then or no, in-person plant walks, and then of course virtual plant walks last year. And it sounds like we're going to be starting those in May or June. So stay tuned. I think it's May. So yeah, again, thank you so much for joining us today. We're really glad you're here. And again, this is a series with Dr. Sarah Sue Myers of Journey Home Healing. I will link her practice in the chat if folks want to learn more. Absolutely. You'll see shortly that she's just so full of wonderful information and here to truly support your healing in whichever way that is, physical, emotional, nutritional, certainly. And we will again link her information in the chat and on the YouTube page. So before we get started on the tour, I just want to start by saying a couple of things. First, we very much encourage participation with our virtual events, and we love hearing from you, engaging in community dialogue. You can absolutely go ahead and ask questions and sentiments as they come up. One good place to do that is in the chat box, and that's where my role is. I'm kind of the facilitator between some questions, putting them to Sarah Sue. So definitely use the chat box to ask questions, or when there's appropriate pausing times for Q&A and you feel comfortable unmuting yourself, go ahead and ask a question. And yeah, I will be able to be in the chat box and share resources there as well. So I'll be sharing some sentiments myself. I'm definitely, like I said, an audience member and a host at the same time. And I'm really excited to learn about the subject with you all. Here's a bit about 21 acres. Oh wait, one more thing I should say. If you feel comfortable sharing your screen, I'm glad, because I love seeing your faces. And the way that the recording shows up, it's only going to be Sarah Sue and my own face that will be on the screen as we record this for YouTube. So it will go up on YouTube later if you want to share this experience with a friend. Okay, so a little bit about 21 acres for those who don't know. 21 Acres is a living laboratory which serves to educate our communities around climate change and how to participate in climate action. And some of the ways we like to do this are by promoting and building resilient food systems that are rooted in agroecology. We also love to support and have our own regenerative farm. We like to support regenerative farmers all over the region. And we also love to support sustainable land stewardship and adopting sustainable living and building practices. 21 Acres is located in Woodinville, Washington, and I'd like to give a land acknowledgement to Woodinville. We are on the ancestral lands of Indigenous nations, including the Stillaguamish tribe, as well as the Duwamish and Coast Salish peoples. And Dr. Sarah Sue Myers is in Bellingham today, which was originally home to the Lummi Nation and more. And we acknowledge these nations, past and present, as the original stewards of this land and honor both the land itself and the Coast Salish people today. And we really appreciate you taking time to learn how we're trying to steward this land for future generations and how to be good stewards to ourselves and our people in this great series. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to Dr. Sarah Sue Myers, and I'll be in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Rianne, for that wonderful introduction. I really appreciate it. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining today, especially us, the first Saturday of April. Spring is definitely in the air, which I'm super excited about. And I think it's just the perfect time right now that you will get to take some of the stuff that we talk about today and explore today and step outside and go do it, because it's actually like nice out and the plants are coming out and there's just going to be a lot of opportunities for connection. I just want to do a little bit more introduction for myself. Rianne did a lovely job. Like she said, I have a business, Journey Home Healing, which under that is my teaching, my naturopathic medical practice, and other fun, creative things that I will be doing in the future. But the primary thing right now is offering naturopathic medical support, kind of like whole person health, right? To those needing help beyond what the conventional medical world has to offer. I'm often the doctor that people go to who don't like doctors. And because I practice under a different set of philosophy than the conventional medical system, I often offer a really valuable vantage point for the people I work with, a different perspective, a different approach, as well as an entirely different set of tools that I work with, including things like herbal medicine, nutrients and nutrition, homeopathy, mind-body medicine, counseling, storytelling, and overall patient empowerment. It's a very patient-centered practice. And all these are often much safer and more often more effective options with less side effects. I serve locally the Bellingham area as well as Lemmy Island, but also continue to work in the Seattle area, especially since telemedicine has gotten much more common in the last year. You can reach me at my website, which I'm just going to include in the chat box. And I will be offering a lot of, or probably 3 other resources today. So I believe post-class, you all will receive a follow-up email, including notes from the chat box. Is that correct, Rianne?
That's right. Yes. Thank you for reminding me about that. I'm going to be sending people follow-up resources to explore these topics a little bit more that you bring up today. And look out for that within probably today.
Yeah. And let's get started. So today, this is the final class of the series, Whole Being Health. And today I want to explore the continued theme of self-care that's been woven through all of them, but this time in relationship to connectedness and connection. So connection can include connection to ourselves. It can include connection to others around us. It can include connection not only to others around us, but to connection to human activity at large, as well as connection to the earth, the planet, and the environment. One thing I'd mention in part 1 of this series, which is available on both my YouTube page and 21 Acres YouTube page to watch, I gave an example of how breathing can activate the parasympathetic nervous system. And I never actually explained it. So I wanted to actually begin there, explaining that concept and also beginning with the breathing exercise for us all. But I just want to do a little bit of introduction first. So one way that we can take care of ourselves is simply through breathing. It's something we do every day, but we're not always breathing in a very functional breath. And when I say functional, what I'm meaning is that we're utilizing the appropriate muscles that were designed for respiration. Does anybody know what the primary respiratory muscle is?
That's a great question.
Your diaphragm?
Yes, it is. And so when you're actually activating and engaging the diaphragm, where is the diaphragm? I'm going to try to show you. It's at the base of your rib cage. So if you're breathing up here, that's not diaphragm. These are all the accessory respiratory muscles. And a common pattern for many people, including myself, is especially in times of stress or focus or really hard work, it's often easy to find ourselves doing shallow breathing and using more of these accessory respiratory muscles. If we activate the diaphragm, we're going to fill up the whole lung capacity, and it's often going to even span even lower to the belly breathing. So step number 1 that I like to do is just making sure that we have access to our diaphragm and our belly And so I'm going to invite all of you to find a seated posture where we're not slumping over, and just get comfortable being able to have your shoulders down, relaxed away from your ears, maybe slightly back with more of an open chest, resting your arms by your sides. It could be on at the sides of a chair, on your lap. You want your bottom sits bones in direct contact with the surface underneath. If those sits bones aren't in contact, your pelvis, that pelvic bowl is probably tilted one way or the other and can also impact the posture. When they're actually in contact with the bottom, you have a much more symmetrical bowl that's not going to tip the contents out, if you think of the analogy of a bowl. And then you could, let's begin with our hands resting. We are going to be using our hands as a tool, but first of all, let's just go ahead and close our eyes. And just settle into your body. Take note of the sensations in your body. If you need to make any adjustments, this is a great time to do it. Notice if you're holding any tension in your body. If you are, try just sending your breath to that area to encourage it to release. Bringing that air towards those areas with the inhale, and then imagining with the exhale that you're breathing out, exhaling out any unneeded tension that is not going to serve you. Take note of your breath. And then take your hands, and I want you to place one hand over your heart, one hand over your belly button. I really like using hands because it's a way we can physically connect with ourselves. They're also great tools to use, our hands. And in this practice, we're going to use our hands as a way to determine which of those respiratory muscles we're utilizing, simply by noticing which one moves more. So go ahead and breathe and just notice that hand movement. And as you are continuing to pay attention, you may notice it shift simply by paying attention. Notice your breath, noticing each part of the breath cycle, which includes the inhale, pause, exhale, pause. Notice if there's a part of that cycle that feels really good to be in, that you like to take a little bit extra time with. Notice if there's a part of the cycle that you don't usually focus on, and maybe focus on that part today. Check in again with your posture, making any adjustments that feel good to your body. And now that we're connected to our breath and our body, I'm going to lead us into a breath cycle that is a little bit more specific to balancing the parasympathetic nervous system. With this, what we're going to do is a shorter inhale. So taking about 5 seconds to breathe in, and then hold at the top, that pause. And then with the exhale, breathing out for 8 to 10 seconds. Pause and repeat. And play around with it. Maybe you start with 6 seconds, inhale, 8 seconds, exhale. But see if you can stretch out that exhale a lot longer than the inhale. You may notice with that inhale that you have to take a bigger gulp of air because you're in the inhale for a shorter period of time. And with the exhale, you get to take your time releasing that air in a much more slow and mindful way. Take notice of the hand on your belly. And with the exhale, imagine it like a balloon deflating slowly. Deflating and deflating and deflating all the way to the pause, where you then get to blow up that balloon again. Let's do a couple more breath cycles like that. And you can remove your hands from your body and placing them back on your legs. Maybe do some finger wiggling or just massaging in your legs with your hands. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. How's everyone feeling? Any questions about what we just did? And you can either speak those or type them in the chat box. While there are questions being typed, I just want to explain briefly again what the parasympathetic nervous system is. This is part of the two-part chain of the autonomic nervous system, the part of the nervous system that's just simply automatically working, whether we're participating or not. There's sympathetic, which is the fight or flight response. And then there's the parasympathetic, which is the rest and digest, the healing response. The healing that we do in our bodies is often when we enter into that parasympathetic state. And sometimes it can be hard to get there because the stress response can happen. And if there isn't time for recovery, there could be another one that happens and another one and another one. And just like with other neurological patterns, we can get stuck in that area a lot of that sympathetic response. And so a lot of the things that we're going to talk about today, including this breathing exercise we just did, activates that parasympathetic nervous system response. The inhale is actually sympathetic tone. So when we inhale, we're activating that part of our system, which is why we shortened the inhale. The exhale is connected to the parasympathetic response, which is why we stay in the exhale for a longer period of time. It's really just that simple. And I find that this is incredibly effective as like a crisis breathing. If you really want to get yourself calmed down, I think one of the mistakes that can be made is when we try to like breathe deeply in times of distress, there's so much emphasis on the inhale, like take a breath in. And it's sort of like an afterthought with the exhale. That breath in could actually be exasperating that response. It's really the exhale where the medicine is with this. The part that happens more automatically with breathing is the inhale. There's a part of our brain, the hypothalamus, that just tells our bodies to do these things. And one of the things that our bodies are told to do just automatically is the inhale. We're going to inhale and we don't really need as much support with it as the exhale. The exhale is more intention and free will with it. And it's a great place to sink in and provide some extra attention and support with it. Let's take it here.
There are some really noticeable moments for myself where I realized I felt like I was sleeping but I was conscious and like doing that body healing that comes through deep sleep and breathing and relaxing for once as a consciously awake person. And there's Catherine who shared in the chat, for me, inhaling for 5 seconds was very long, and Catherine realizes and now and knew before that she constantly breathes superficially.
Yeah, maybe like a more of the upper accessory muscles. Yeah. Yeah, those deep and shallow breaths are so common. And this is a great thing to practice daily because, right, these muscles have they have patterns to them and they're being used to being used. We have to train that diaphragm just like we do with strength training with any other muscle. So this is a great exercise to practice daily. It doesn't really take a lot of time and effort, and you get the benefits of feeling really relaxed afterwards.
We have a couple of questions too, I think. One from Rebecca. After the slow exhale, is it helpful to take another pause before the next inhale?
Yeah.
So the pause is
Yeah.
part of the whole cycle. I love
I
that.
think of it the analogy of climbing a mountain with the breath, where the inhale's like going to the top of a mountain, but it's really that pause. You want to just stop and take a look at the peak of that mountain and take a moment to just look around. That exhales the descent. But when you get there, you also want to just take a moment to pause and reflect as well. I really like that analogy. I'm sure there's a lot of other creative ones that you could come up with.
And there's another one from my mom. Hi, Mom. I'm so glad you're here. So, mom's name is DC, and she shares that she started to get a little lightheaded. I did too. This is a great question. Was this due to breathing out too slowly, or what might have been the cause?
Did either of you guys yawn by any chance when you were doing it?
I didn't yawn.
Yeah. So what's going on are some physiological adaptations that are I'll try to explain them as simple as possible. But our lungs are responsible for this like pH balance in our bodies that like because carbon dioxide contributes to that. And our bodies are used to having so much carbon dioxide in our bodies at a time. But then all of a sudden, if we change our breathing pattern and there's less of that carbon dioxide, the body tries to adapt because it has a homeostasis that it's in. And so what will happen is the body will try to bring in more CO2, carbon dioxide, by a big yawn.
It looks like my mom did yawn, she said in the chat.
It's super common, especially if you're just beginning these types of practices. And if you're doing it, it kind of means you're doing it right and your body's just, it's adapting to a new situation that you're putting it in, which is a great way to help strengthen vitality. A lot of times when I think about health, like what constitutes someone being healthy, it's about someone being able to push and challenge themselves and allow the body to adapt to that new thing. And I think the same goes with the lightheadedness. It's just the body isn't acclimated to having that much oxygen in the body and maybe less CO2 because with this practice in particular, you're emitting or exhaling a lot more CO2 than the body is typically used to.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for helping with that question. And I have one final one for just myself, and I felt so connected to this breathing exercise, and I was kind of wondering what's the optimal time to allow to do this, like maybe 20 breaths or 5 minutes or 10 minutes just to start your day if you're like me who doesn't do this as often as they should. What's a good way to that time?
I think what I think about with it is at least like 2 to 5 minutes is what I recommend to patients. And how you do that, I think varies on personalities and like what works for people. For some, it's counting the breath cycles. For some, you could just find a song you really love that's 5 minutes long and breathe during that song. The sky's kind of the limit with it. But I would say working with getting to like a 5 minutes a day. But you could also break it up if you just, doing like 3 of those breath cycles at a time. That's better than nothing. And if that's speckled throughout your day, then great.
I'm obsessed. This is great. Thank you so much for that practice.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to the next thing. So the question I wanted to pose to you all today is, how has nature supported you in your healing? The second question with that, or maybe another way to think about it, is when was the last time you felt a profound connection to nature? So this can be big or it can be little. Sometimes those little things are what get us through the day and really help fortify our vitality and spirit. So just to think about that, like, how have you felt supported by nature, or when was the last time you felt a profound connection to nature? And I'm just going to keep moving on because I really want to cover all the material today. So I am going to give some examples of it. Go ahead and put your answers in the box. And as we're going through this list, I will be taking a look at that and making sure that those answers have been included and integrated. So examples of how nature can heal and support herbal medicine is a big one. I'm not going to go into that too much today. There's a lot of plant medicine walks that I've done with 21 Acres that you could find on their website or on their YouTube page that are recordings from those classes that talk about at least the herbs that are in the Pacific Northwest area. Water is a big one that I want to talk about today. And specifically, I want to talk about hydrotherapy. So we started this session with a breathing exercise that helps to strengthen and activate the parasympathetic nervous system. Hydrotherapy can be a similar thing at helping to balance the parasympathetic nervous system and that overall autonomic nervous system, as well as improving things like circulation, promoting healing due to that circulation increase, draining lymphatic tissue or lymphatic fluid and debris that is often moving through the lymph that the body's trying to drain and get out. One example that I mentioned actually in an article that I wrote for the first of the sessions was talking about cold plunging. Cold plunging can be a really fun way to activate your autonomic nervous system. Again, that goes back to this concept of adaptation. So cold water is a stressor, and jumping into cold water, especially if it's in the colder seasons, is a stressor to the body. But the interesting thing about practices like these is that we're doing them with our own personal consent, and we've taken steps to get to that point to jump in the cold water. So we're aware of it, it's in a safe container, whereas a lot of other stressors can often come up without our consent, without our, they just pop up out of nowhere. But practices like these, we get to have a choice in that. And then we jump in the cold water and we get out. And so there's that stress, and then we're removed from it. And the body's able to practice adapting and coming back to a state of equilibrium following that stressor. And doing practices like this are, again, like another way to help strengthen the overall body's ability to adapt. I think it's very similar to yoga practices, especially some of the more challenging yoga asanas or postures, is that they are actually stressors to the body. Like they can be physically challenging, mentally challenging, depending on the type of practice of the yoga. It can be environmentally challenging if it's a hot yoga class. But then in between these poses, or like at the end of the class, there's savasana, so that we're able to then return back to a state of balance. And in that, the body has experienced stress, it's been able to adapt, and it's stronger because of it. I want to connect this to the environment too with the water therapy. Often, many people that seek out water therapy, of whether it's swimming, cold plunging, wading their feet in the water, it's in natural bodies of water. And where I am at up here in Bellingham, I live fairly close to the Salish Sea. And there's a lot of streams that drain into that big body of water. And they're all coming from this cliffside above the beach that are all residential areas. And I can see these little drainages on the sides of the road, the ditches. There was just a reservoir built in this area because there is so much water drainage and it's a big problem. All of that's running through human activity and then getting drained out into this natural body of water where there's a lot of waterfowl, heron, the wildlife, a huge ecosystem that's down there. Do you think that that's fresh water that's entering into that space? No. I think that's like a really important thing to think about. It literally feels like it hits home for me here, and thinking about what kind of stuff also could be found in that water aside from like literal garbage but other human activities that can really harm the water include things that are chemicals that are added to plants, whether they are pesticides, or fertilizers. That stuff's going to be going into these water drainages, or surface runoff is another term for that. Washing cars and driveways, that soap goes into the waterways, which can really impact a lot of the waterfowl. There is a chemical in a lot of soaps that helps remove oil and grease from places. There are certain animals that rely on oil and grease on their feathers in order to float, including ducks. If ducks are exposed to a large enough amount of the surfactant found in soaps and detergents, they can't float anymore. Their oils get washed off and they sink. I remember learning about that when they did an experiment to see what kind of impact different substances that are used in wildland firefighting have on a population.
I'm wondering, how do you spell surfactant, that chemical, so we know to avoid it?
There's the name of it, but yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the, like any soap that is like, what's the word, labeled to remove oils and grease will do such things like that. Let me get back to my notes here.
And as a time check, we're at 12:37.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, any pest control too or other things. So I want to bring that up because, again, we're talking about connection today. So what is our connection with our waters around us? You know, are we going there to just simply use them? But is there a reciprocity that's being shown and expressed? When I think about water therapy, I want to invite this concept for you all to think about and explore. Instead of just thinking of it like a water therapy, what could it be differently? Perhaps with like a little bit of intention and a little bit of care. When you put intention into something, it becomes something bigger and more powerful, much like a ceremony does. And so starting to experience when you're taking care of yourself that you're not just going through the motions, can you put an intention into it and create just a little ceremony for yourselves with that? And notice how that feels different. And maybe notice if it feels more sustainable in the long run. How can you take water therapy to that next level? Creating an intention, maybe simply thanking the water, maybe praying to bless the water or blow kisses to the water, dancing, jumping, intentional breathing, even like loud hooting after you do the cold plunge. Those can lead to something more profound than just a simple therapy. And then maybe a deeper relationship is formed with that water, and there's a bigger sense of responsibility to take other actions to take care of it. in times when you're maybe not doing the ceremony, or you're doing a ceremony of a different kind. All right, back to let me just make sure I'm not missing anything. Oh, yes. Unplugging from technology and plugging into the earth. Let's go there next. Actual physical contact with the earth. There are different terms for this, buzzwords, including earthing and grounding. I wanted to just include a definition of earthing, and I am going to include also this link where I got most of this information. Not most of it, but it was the one I was looking at the other day that had a healthy amount of that information. So earthing simply means reconnecting the conductive human body to the earth's natural and subtle surface electrical charge. An effortless lifestyle activity that systemically influences the basic bioelectrical function of the body. Doing so surprisingly stabilizes physiology, reduces inflammation, pain, stress, improves sleep, improves blood flow, as well as lymphatic and venous return to the heart, and produces a greater sense of well-being. Rianne, you actually wrote about some of this in your post yesterday, and I loved it. Another thing, so this is like a really simple concept. Aside from like all of the electrical conduction and bioelectrical functions, one way you can think about earthing is you just literally like touching something of the earth. It could be the ground, it could be a tree, rock, sand, it could be in a body of water. And you're going to typically need about 30 minutes of that contact in order to start to receive some of these therapeutic benefits, which there is a lot of evidence with these. This has been studied not just in one or two papers, but a lot of other, like many papers, on some of the therapeutic effects of simply connecting and touching the earth. Again, it helps reduce inflammation and reducing pain. Other things that it reduces include cortisol levels, which are a stress hormone that is secreted in that sympathetic fight or flight response. And cortisol can have negative impacts, especially if it's hanging out in the body too long. Cortisol also can sometimes take a long time to degrade, or we just have too much of it streaming in our body. It can interfere with sleep. It could interfere with blood sugar regulation. It's a nice one to like have when we need it, and then for it to go away when we are not needing it. Another thing that physically touching the earth does is improve or increase our heart rate variability. Heart rate variability is the variation in time from one beat of your heart to the next, to the next, to the next. So with heart rate variability, it's looking at how much variation there is in those time increments between the beats. And they're very minute differences, but they can be easily measured through very simple tools and technology. If there's not a lot of variation in between heart beats, when there's more of a monotone to it, that's actually correlated with lower health and correlated with a lot of other negative health impacts. Well, I guess that would be a nice umbrella term for that. The higher the heart rate variability, the more healthy a person is. So they have less risk of cardiovascular disease and events. There is the lowering of adverse effects of anxiety, PTSD, panic disorders. A higher heart rate variability can help reduce negative thinking loops in our heads, the stories we tell, just the thought patterns we get stuck in. That higher heart rate variability can increase self-regulation. as well as improving emotional intelligence, cognitive performance, concentration, and a quicker recovery from stressors throughout the days. So essentially improving our resilience in life, as well as an improved ability to practice creativity and compassion. It essentially impacts how we are connected to ourselves and to others around us. Heart rate variability is really awesome. And that practice we did at the beginning of this class is a great at-home practice to start improving your heart rate variability. This is often what a lot of biofeedback practitioners will be working with, is helping to improve heart rate variability. There's a lot of different ways to strengthen and tonify that. And one is simply just going outside, laying down a blanket, because you can still get the benefits of that physical contact even if you're on a blanket, and just laying down for like 30 minutes. You can do your breathing, you can read a book, whatever it is. Any questions so far? Let's see.
Maybe as we wait for questions to come in, I was sharing in the chat something I noticed. When we fill ourselves with that intention to celebrate, as you're mentioning with water, I felt reminded of pet therapy, which we'll get to somewhere. But when I'm looking at an animal or a pet and I'm like, oh my God, I love you. I love you. You're so cute and perfect. I'm saying that in my body. Like, I'm saying I love, and that energy and that emotion is here with me, even though I'm expressing it outwards. And I feel like that's the secret and the magic of pet therapy, at least. And I realize that connection now to ceremony and intention, and you're just making all these beautiful connections, connections for me.
Yes, and thank you for sharing that, Rianne. That actually reminds me of another great way you can practice strengthening your heart rate variability, is simply just practicing love, appreciation, care, and affection. I did a lot of training over the course of the last couple of years. I would say 3 years ago. It was when I was still pregnant with my son, with Heart Math, which is a company that focuses solely on heart rate variability and heart coherence. And that's a big part of a lot of these initial practices that they introduce to us to practice with clients, is simply doing practices of bringing into the breath or into the heart something that brings you those feelings of love, appreciation, compassion, and gratitude, affection. Yeah, Heart Math is awesome. That, if you're interested in learning more about this content, that would be another great resource to check out. Let me see if I have any other fun things about heart rate variability. Oh, I wanted to share this really interesting study that I found yesterday when I was preparing for this class. There was a study of premature babies at Penn State NICU, and they were treated with, so this one was with the grounding earthing frequencies. They had these like nifty patches that emit the same electromagnetic frequency that the earth emits. And they put it on these premature babies. And they found that the group that had these patches versus the control group that did not, that those patches helped to strengthen the vagal tone. So when I say vagal, it's talking about mostly the vagus nerve that controls and helps a lot of our organs function. So our lungs, heart, vessels, our digestive organs, a lot of things that are needed for growth and development, especially of a premature infant. And it also improved their heart rate variability. And so it just was so touching. It literally like touched my heart reading about this and thinking about the creativity of getting this sort of technology out there. There are things, so we don't always have the option to go lay on the ground outside. Some of us have snow, maybe there's not a yard available. maybe there's someone dealing with chronic pain and illness, so it's just really hard to get outside. There are things available that are pretty cheap, actually. Things like grounding mats, there's grounding sheets, different grounding products altogether. I am not affiliated with any of those companies, and I'm still, I would say, a little bit of a novice learning about them. But I did buy my own earthing mat that I have been using and experimenting with over the last several months. And I love putting it on my bodywork table underneath the sheet. And when I work on my patients, I just feel like, for me, that feels like a ceremony of preparing the space for my patients before they get on the table. And then they get that benefit.
That sounds absolutely amazing. Wow. I need to book some sessions with you, because even just this breathing exercise, I've noticed that I haven't felt this calm in a long time. I'm always just so grateful for your connection. And anyway, again, we're going to send out a resource list to all of our Eventbrite attendees, and we'll have some information, of course, Sarah Sue's website, Journey Home Healing.
Yeah. And I did put a link that goes to Heart Math. This one is about global interconnectedness. Can I share? Oh, I can share the screen. Let me make sure it's on the image that I want.
I hope I made you host. Here, let me.
Oh no, I'll be able to do it. I just need to get. Oh, cool. Okay. There's just this really beautiful picture, and I had to include this with our talk today on connection here. So.
Well, I'm not sure if it would be too distracting, but there are some questions we had come up too while you're getting that one.
Let's cover this just briefly, and then let's do questions. Since we're talking about electrical magnetic frequencies of the earth emits one, but so does our hearts. Do our hearts, as do our brains. So brains emit one that's about 1 inch off of the brain organ itself, whereas the heart emits an electromagnetic frequency 3 feet off of the organ in every direction, which is why you have this beautiful cylindrical colored fields around these two people. I remember showing a photo similar to this to my 2.5-year-old son, and he called them donuts around the people. And they interact with each other. I mean, talk about being connected. So not only are we walking around and emitting a certain type of electromagnetic frequency from our hearts, but our frequencies intermingle and interact together, and often can behave like tuning forks. So if one is like, say Ariane's walking down the street and she just saw like the cutest puppy, and she's just like radiating with love and appreciation, and someone else who's grumbling and has just had the hardest day, and their two fields intermingle, they're going to impact one another. I'm going to guess that that other person will probably maybe feel a softening. Thinking about this sort of capability that we have. And the more we practice and strengthen heart rate variability, it leads to a stronger coherence or coherent connection between the heart and the rest of the body and the environment. We literally become the medicine and the therapy for others and for ourselves. And a great way to also foster and strengthen it is being connected to the earth. It's like this design was in place. It was built to be like this, and we just kind of like neglected it and forgot about it along the way, until some nifty science came and rediscovered something that's old and ancient and put some numbers and pictures to it, and we're like, oh yeah, this is important. It's been important all along. But yeah, it's an interesting thing. Roland McCready from Heart Math talks about like, how are you going to feed the field with your own heart donut, as my son would call it.
Heart donut. That is the cutest thing. Has this shape, I am digging back into my sacred geometry self. When I was 19, I was obsessed. Is this the torus, the toroidal field? Do you know about that?
Oh, I'm a complete beginner when it comes to that stuff. But does that remind you of that kind of shape?
It does. It's this. There is a shape. I don't remember the thing. If anyone else might be on the call who knows, Taurus equals donut astrologically. Yes, we love food. But toroidal field, the Taurus energy is a donut. That's what I guess Catherine's saying in the chat. Yes, it's a toroid. Okay, cool. Thank you everyone for confirming that. So that's something maybe to look into too. I want to send you something I've seen in the past about that.
Mhm.
Well, on the topic of connection, and the biological processes of, how ironic it is that we all just feel so much better by even looking at our natural landscape. Like my mom shared, looking out into Mount Rainier is absolutely so calming and so serene from just sitting. We feel this connection to Earth and ourselves, and it really does reinforce that galactic home that Earth had been for us as we evolved into this society that we have today. It's so important to just get back out there, touch the earth. We did have a question about touching rocks, and if even just holding rocks in the hand might emit something similar to earthing. Do you know about that?
I believe so. I haven't looked at any specific studies that are solely with that, but my guess is with our love and intrigue of like gathering rocks and crystals and stones and having these really cool mats like made of out of like entirely stones, like yeah, there's probably benefit there too. Plus you get, just even like the symbology and again like the ceremony, like it maybe has a therapy and a benefit, but then there's the power and the meaning that you connect to it that could give it even more meaning. Someone maybe argue that this is placebo, which maybe that's the case, but I also think that when there is intention and a strong system that this is a good medicine for you, that it ends up being more therapeutic. Um, Even with like normal like medicines and supplements, with some patients who are I can tell that they would like to go in this direction. I talk about like, before you take your medicines, maybe just say a prayer, that they will like serve you in a good and true and beautiful way. Maybe, if you're going to be cleansing all your crystals in the moonlight, put your supplements out there too and ask them to be cleansed. Like treat your medicines with like this respect and like create intent. Like, again, I think what leads to a ceremony is not only action, but intentionality with it. And it doesn't have to be a big production. Kind of like my story that I created in that video with my son. For those of you who didn't see it, I just talked about how I laid a spread of snacks and we were just sitting there and eating them, but it was like in this special room and it felt really good. And my almost 3-year-old at this point now was like, "Oh, Mama, it feels like we're having ceremony." Because I really think he noticed that it was a little bit out of ordinary. It wasn't just us sitting at the kitchen table eating food. It felt more special than that.
That is so perfect. Well, I guess we're approaching the last 3 minutes of the event, and if anyone might have any questions, should we open it up to live Q&A?
Can I like stretch and get like 5 more minutes? So we'd be going 3 minutes over. Would that work for you, Rianne?
It works for me for sure.
Okay, because I really want to cover the rest of the stuff. I think it's really important, and I'm okay staying long in order to make it all covered. If you guys have to leave, I completely understand. I respect your time.
It will absolutely be on YouTube later for y'all.
Yeah. All right.
So I want to sit here all day, honestly. I love this. This is amazing.
So we talked about like, how does nature support you? And these are just like the few that I had thought of. I'm sure that there's many other ways, but again, we talked about herbs, we've talked about water therapy, or at least one example of water therapy. We talked about actual physical contact with the earth. Plus, and then the fourth one, which I just want to touch on and then get to the next subject, is just the simplicity of bringing us joy and like a playground, like an area that gives us like space and freedom to play and to learn and to retreat and to rest. Like the outdoors is a container for so many of the things that we can do to help support ourselves. And so with that, how do we practice proper etiquette in these activities? I think about the, like, you know, when with outdoor recreation, like backpacking and camping and hiking, that old term, pack it in, pack it out. And this really strong responsibility that we take care of the earth because the earth takes care of us. I see that practiced pretty well in that culture, but I think it's something that we can ask ourselves again, like every day, like, how do we reciprocate back to Mother Earth, planet Earth, for all that she gives to us? I talked about just like growing our awareness around certain things. The first example was the surface runoff. So, you know, in using that creativity, like how else can I support? Because, you know, in order for us to understand where to support, we have to learn first. So maybe like your step right now is just starting to learn more of the connection of the state of the environment, where it's being hurt, and going upstream to see what are the root causes of it. You know, and with some of those root causes, I think we have to also acknowledge that there's a lot of inequality in our society that leads to people not even having the bandwidth to think about this. I remember experiencing this and having this realization for my first time when I was doing Peace Corps in Morocco. And I was assigned to the environmental sector where I was supposed to, like, I don't know, save the environment. I felt a little underqualified, even though I'd spent like 4 years fighting fires. I'd done like an aquatic invasive species internship. All of my work resume up to that point was in outdoor and natural resources. Yet when I showed up there, I was like, I don't even know where to start, because when I look around, people are sick, they're stressed out, they're living in poverty. Like most of the people in this village are illiterate. They're suffering and in survival mode. So why would they care about the environment? They don't have any resources or energy in themselves internally to put into the care of the planet, because they can barely put it into themselves. And I think that's very important to think about when it comes to taking care of the earth and finding, basically revealing the areas in our society that's leading to things like this, like systemic racism and the realization that white supremacy has influenced all parts of our lives in this culture. Access to education, access to food. There are many places in this country where there is not a grocery store within miles of the place of these residential areas. There's only convenience stores where there's not really like actual food in them. It's addressing inequality with people with disabilities or, you know, disabled bodies, people that aren't as easily accepted due to differences in gender identity or many other societal factors. I think it's important that this work gets incorporated into saving the world and saving the planet. Other things that you can consider doing that I can consider doing myself is conscious consumerism. In the book Braiding Sweetgrass, Robin Wall Kimmerer talks about doing a practice where she goes foraging at the store, where she'll go to like buy things and think about like how many steps were taken? What can I like trace this thing that I'm going to buy back to a plant or a natural resource? The example she gave was a pen, because she's a writer and she's a professor, and trying to justify her need for these pens in order to do her work, but realizing like how there's so many paths just for the production of this pen. Like what even are these materials? And I think that this can be a really fun activity, very engaging activity for the brain, of where tracing that product back to its points of origin, and then thinking about all the natural resources that were needed or required in the production of it. One example that I learned about in the last several years was the clothing industry, and how it's one of the major polluters of the water, our natural bodies of water. I have an article there for that. I will impart to you all if you want to learn and read more about that. And then, just looking around at your resources, like, oh yeah, so I already talked about that. Like, do you need to buy brand new clothes? Probably not. Clothing is a very interesting thing. So it's really about like getting into, maybe the first step is getting in touch with what your values are. Like, does the value for saving the planet, is that bigger or equal to for a love and desire of fashion, which I can totally empathize with. There's a lot of different companies out there though. Like, is there an alternative? Like, is there a greener option, a more sustainable, conscious clothing option that can be presented? Or the same way in like food production too. There's a lot of the conventional food products, and then there's a lot of other areas where you can buy like real food and they're doing it the right way, like 21 Acres Market. With the clothing example, thinking about reducing consumption of it, repurposing clothing, or simply reusing, going to like your local like Value Village or Buffalo Exchange, or another thrift store. Another great place to look, if you're searching for products that you do need and you want to find a more supportive option, I say when in doubt, look for a B corporation. B corporations are these awesome corporations. These companies pay for certification that helps to better the environment, to make it a healthier environment for their employees, and many other things. And there's thousands and thousands of them. Some examples of B corporations include Patagonia, Ben and Jerry's, surprisingly.
Love them.
Burt's Bees. Oh, there's even like a couple online bookstores that are B corporations. I will go to those bookstores. I will go out of my way and pay more to go to those bookstores and order books than through Amazon, because I really want to support companies that are taking the extra step, the extra 5 steps, to do business for good.
Well, absolutely. Just so grateful that you could share all of this.
One more thing.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah. The last one I just wanted to talk about is talking about animal products. And so giving back to the planet again is like what we're exploring. And I just want to invite you to get informed on where the animal products are coming from, knowing your options that you have access to. I encourage you all to start reading labels and looking for things like, where is the origin of this product? And this could be done for things beyond animal products. But for this one, I do think that what we choose to consume deeply impacts the environment. Was it farmed, or is it a wild form? So for example, of salmon, you can either find salmon that's been farmed or wild caught salmon. Is there an organic version, grass-fed or pasture-raised, non-GMO, etc.? I think another thing with animal products too is discerning the need. is there an alternative to this? Especially when it comes to conventional meats and seafoods. Here in the Pacific Northwest, there's been a salmon crisis. The salmon populations have been threatened. There's been some really sad signs of it, including the mother orcas not being able to produce enough milk for their offspring because they're starving. And so exploring making more mindful choices, even if that means a sacrifice of, you don't get to eat salmon as much, but thinking about how that supply and demand is impacting the salmon populations and those other populations in nature that rely on them. I just saw recently there is a new documentary on Netflix called Seaspiracy. I have not seen it. I've heard from people that have watched it that they don't ever want to eat seafood again after that. That could be an interesting thing to explore. I would just recommend, again, tuning into what your values are and really getting clear with those. And then when you're faced with making a choice, that instead of you shoulding on yourself, connect with your values first, what's important to you first, and then go from there. Last thing, support your bees, your local bees and other pollinators. Go plant some flowers. Go plant some flowers in like an abandoned field. Like, go like be a, what is the?
Like guerrilla planting.
Guerrilla planting, yeah. Go be a guerrilla planter. Let's support and love on our pollinator populations. Okay, thank you all for sticking around. I so appreciate it. I'm done.